Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am excited to have Ashton Rodenhiser as my guest. And let me tell you about Ashton. So Ashton is passionate about lifting the creative spirit in everyone that she meets. For the past 7 years, she's followed her passion for helping people communicate their ideas combined with creativity by founding Mind's Eye Creative Consulting. You will often find her with markers in hand as she's helping to bring ideas to life through graphic recording and graphic facilitation practices. She worked with diverse groups from nonprofits to Fortune 500 companies, and it may appear that she's a silent illustrator in the room, but in fact, she's helping break down complex concepts and notions into easily understandable visual language, helping others retain more information while intriguing and inspiring people. She has been able to really continue practicing those techniques all throughout everything that she does. Over the years, she's brought over 2,500 presentations and conversations to life by just drawing digitally. You know, my husband's an artist and I love reading about this and am excited to have her share with us drawing is your best learning tool. Please join me in my guest, Ashton Rodenhiser. And it is true, you know, I am from an artistic family, and to see how some people learn so much better using that visual piece. And my husband was a math and art teacher, and he actually made math more interesting by helping them see it visually. And so recently, in the past, I don't know, several years, Doodly or something like that, you know, the different, every so often you'll see that video out there that has a story, but it's in that animated line drawing, simple cartoony thing, but it really helps you remember it more than just a person talking or words across the screen. So I'm anxious to hear about how you started, but we always ask that first easy question. Please share with everyone, where do you live?
I live in Nova Scotia, Canada.
Nova Scotia, on my list to visit.
It's
Definitely
pretty great here, born and raised. It's pretty beautiful. So come on up whenever you want.
I definitely want
around.
to.
Now you know someone to show you around.
I know. And it's always better that way, because you could take us to all the places that we would normally go.
Yeah, all the secret spots. Definitely. Yeah. Hidden gems for sure.
So how did you really get started? I'm sure you weren't from day one thinking entrepreneurial path, but
Yeah.
talk about, how did you get started and be on this path that you are in this journey?
Yeah. So I feel like I always have to kind of go back to high school and in my story, because it really does, it's sort of like a snowball effect of how I made decisions through my life. So I was very smart in high school, kind of top of my class, got really good grades, but I really did not know what I wanted to do. And I was graduating at a time of the '07, '08, a
Oh,
couple years, I guess, but we were like
nice.
going into the recession.
Oh, yeah, nice.
So it was like the rhetoric was like, well, no one's getting a job. So I was really stumped in what I was going to do. And
Yeah.
I thought maybe a teacher. I'd always worked with kids, but there's a lot of teachers had no jobs, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, and I had to fund all my own schooling myself. So I didn't want to go and do a bunch of schooling and getting on all these loans if I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So the only thing that I really felt passionate about doing was being a mother. So at the end of high school, that's all I told everybody. It's going to be mom, going to be a mom, going to be a mom. And that was kind of looked down upon, unfortunately, but I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I don't know when that's going to happen, but it will happen sometime. So I decided to take early childhood education because I was like, well, I'd always worked with kids. I'll work with little kids until I have my own. So I'll just, it's a transferable education. I'll use
Yeah.
it throughout my life. And I do have 3 children now. I did do that whole thing. Luckily, it worked out for me. Married my high school sweetheart, so
There you go.
all good. And but when I graduated from that course, um, I really didn't know. I was like not so excited about working with kids in a professional setting, unfortunately. After I'd finished this program, I was like, maybe that wasn't the smartest thing ever. Because I didn't want to work in a daycare. But I ended up moving to the city because I thought maybe I wanted to transition into sign language interpreting. So that's the reason why I moved to the city. But when I moved there, I was like, well, I need to work. I have no money. I need a job. So I got a job at a nonprofit family resource center. And that place taught me a lot about community development and it taught me about facilitation. So I was there for a couple of years, and the last half of my time there, I morphed into a facilitator role. And I started, it was more like with families and things and parents. And I was able to kind of learn and hone the way that facilitators work, right? You hear what they're saying, you're feeding it back, and you're helping people connect to each other and to their own ideas. So fast forward a few years of doing that and then leaving that job, a couple other things happened in there. And then someone just sort of casually said to me one day that there was a course about graphic facilitation. I had no idea what that was. I took that course when my first child was 6 months old, and that was 10 years ago this month. And I took that course and I was like, this is it. This is the best thing ever, because it was in the world of facilitation where you're really helping people connect to ideas, but you could do it in drawings. And I think secretly I always kind of wanted to be an artist. So it was just kind of this beautiful coming together of all things really creative that I'd love to do, but never really pursued professionally or really in depth, and the world of facilitation coming together. And yeah, kind of the rest is history.
And it really, in a lot of ways, as you were talking, made perfect sense to me, because in early education, we know that stories are told by pictures and understood, like language is learned by pictures. And so it just seems a natural thing if you had that artistic vision and ability that you could be really using that towards being a better facilitator.
Yeah.
So it was meant to be. It
is so interesting because when I look back now, there's patterns of communication. I love helping children communicate. I almost was a sign language interpreter, almost did that. And then in facilitation, you're helping communicate. Graphic facilitation, you're helping people communicate. So like, I didn't really realize it until almost like not even a year ago. I was like, oh wait, there's like a pattern here to things that, that I've either considered pursuing or have pursued. And it's all been along the lines in its own way around helping people communicate, helping people connect to one another, which I think is really kind kind of fascinating that was a thread
It truly is.
And it was like, I didn't even mean for it to happen that way.
Yeah. I mean, even the sign language piece, because sign language is really visual.
Yeah.
You're speaking by your pictures with your hands
Your
and
body.
everything.
Yeah.
I teach Chinese students how to be better speakers, and their Chinese teacher was showing me the Chinese language, because I was saying, well, Chinese has got to be one of the hardest languages to learn. And she said, well, really reading it is just pictures. And she started putting them on the walls and showing me all this. And I thought, it is.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Little caricatures and how they're put together. Definitely.
Yes.
I always say drawings are just, or letters are just drawings in disguise, right? Like you can draw because you can write letters, especially in the Chinese language. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So you talk about in your bio history about graphic recording. So what exactly is graphic recording?
Yeah, I always find, us and our all individual industries have all these fancy terms that we use, right? But no one knows what they mean. But graphic facilitation, graphic recording, live illustration, sketchnoting, they all use the same skill set. It's just in a bit of a different way. Graphic recording, the way I like to describe it is it's like more of a one-to-one. So there's a speaker on a stage and I'm creating a visual of what they just said for that half an hour or that 60 minutes. Graphic facilitation is I'm in a room with a bunch of people. They're all saying things. I have to listen to everybody and create a cohesive graphic of what everybody is saying. Sketchnoting is same skill set, but you're doing it for yourself, for your own learning, right? So it's the same skill set, just applied in different ways. And if you're listening for someone else or you're listening for yourself.
So one of the things that I teach whenever I'm teaching speaking and leadership is the importance of active listening. And so what you just described for me is someone that is highly capable and skilled in active listening.
Yeah, sometimes, when you kind of create your own career for yourself, you can call yourself whatever you want. And sometimes as a joke, but also being very serious, is that I'm basically a professional listener at the same time. I'm a professional doodler. I'm a professional listener. I'm a professional communicator. But all those pieces come together. Like you see the drawing that I'm creating, but what you don't see is exactly what you recognize: the listening, the thinking, the processing, the synthesizing, the understanding. And then I draw it and then I write it down. But the majority of the work is happening inside my brain. And yeah, that's where the powerhouse definitely is. And I was at 2 in-person events last week. It was a very busy week. And I was talking to one of the AV guys, because I was up in the AV booth because we plugged in digitally and projected it on the screen. And he's like, you have to listen to everything. I was like, yeah, like there's no wandering, like where and you're in the audience, you can just let your mind wander and be like, oh, I wonder what they're having for lunch. No, no, not even for a second. You have to be so present and so focused. And it's very exhausting. More mentally. I think people think I'm physically tired, especially when I'm doing it on paper in rooms. They think, oh, you must be so physically tired. And I am, but it's more emotional, mental exhaustion at the end of the day.
Really?
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned sketchnoting, and I know that's on your website, all about that. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but explain to the audience what sketchnoting is.
Yeah. So like I said, it's the same skill set, but it's more about taking your own notes. So it's something that I've been doing a lot more recently, is teaching people how to listen and think and draw their own notes, right? So it's the same skill set that I use as a professional, but the listening part is different, right? You're listening for yourself, whereas I'm listening as a professional in a room to everybody else and trying to create that cohesiveness if it's a facilitated thing or what the speaker is saying, and I'm trying to listen for the room. Whereas sketchnoting, you can listen to your own personal aha moments that are coming up for you, or draw little things that mean something to you. Where in a professional setting, I have to try to remove my bias. It's impossible, but remove as much of my personal feelings about a subject in what I'm creating, and just focus on what's being actually said, and listening to and kind of the wholeness of that. But sketchnoting is really that personalized element in your own. If you're in meetings, or you're a student in university or high school or what have you, like my oldest is 10 now, and she's now learning, because they're learning how to do note taking in school. So I'm teaching her how to do it now.
I recently saw a movie, and it might have been a Hallmark movie, because I am addicted to them, but it was interesting, because it was a side story was about the child of a single father who was dyslexic, and they were able to have her learn and present better, because she told the story through pictures, and that helped her remember the words because of the pictures.
Right.
And I wonder if note-taking is better that way.
Yeah, well, there's definitely like some brain science around how majority of us think in pictures, right? And that's why my business is called Mind's Eye Creative, because it's like your mind's eye, how you're thinking of picture in your mind. And, there's all the cliches, a picture's worth 1,000 words, blah, blah, blah. But one of my favorite stats is doodling can help you remember up to 29% more information. Just doodling, like not even sketchnoting, right? That's just doing a little meaningless something, like something, just little marks. So what I like to say is like, take that doodling that's benefiting you already and just make it work for you a little bit. Add in the information, add a drawing that relates to what you heard, instead of just something random, right? Hopefully there'll be a study on that eventually of how that increases, but I can only assume it would increase it even further. But because most people think in pictures, and the majority of people prefer visual as part of how they like to learn. It might not be the only way, it might not be number one, but it's definitely a part of it. So it speaks to the majority of the people in a room. And even if they're not using it as a learning tool in a facilitation setting, you can use it as an engagement tool, and like allowing people to feel seen, valued, and heard in a room. Because I heard something, I wrote it down, and I drew a picture, and now the person sitting in the meeting is like, oh, I feel heard in this. She wrote it down. It's out there for everybody to see. It's very large. It's there, right? So even if you are in the minority of people who don't prefer to learn visually, you're still getting benefit from it, from an engagement piece too, which is really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that is very much so. So there's those people that are out there saying, I can't draw a straight line.
I know.
How can people get started sketching? And I would always disagree with them, because as I said, I'm married to an art teacher, and he used to teach them how to just like in life, start small and work your way out.
Yeah, so curious to see what he would think of my approach to this, because it's the same thing. I teach people how to draw a line, and then you take that line and turn it into an arrow, and you take that line and you turn it into a square, and then you're just building, right?
Exactly.
So what I was finding was people were saying to me all the time, like, oh, I wish I could do what you do. And I'm like, but you could though. I wasn't the best quote unquote artist when I started doing this. I came from more of that listening, thinking world, right? And even though I've always been very creative, I didn't actually draw a whole lot. I knitted, I felted, I did encaustic, which is like wax painting for a while. I know how to play lots of different instruments. I'm learning how to play the bagpipes right now. Like kind of very eclectic in my but very kind of jack of all trades, master of none in all of my different art things that I've tried over the years. But I really had to develop my drawing style. Like I had to actually learn how to draw stuff. I came in more from the communication side. And so I like to show people how, quote unquote, horrible my early drawings were when I was working and trying to figure out how to do this. And they're not beautiful by any means, you know, but I just stuck with it. Right. So I just try to say to people, just, you know, helping people bridge the gap to creating their first sketch note seems to be the biggest hurdle. So that's what I usually focus on the most and handhold people as much as possible through the process of just creating their first one. Right. And then it's like, oh, that wasn't so hard. Maybe I could do another one without Ashton holding my hand through it. Yeah.
So how do you draw for a convention presentation? I'm fascinated by that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So everyone is so different. My approach is I don't like to know anything ahead of time. So there's an element of risk in there every time I do it, because who knows what the presenter is like, right? Have they been doing this for 30 years and are really good? Or this is their first talk they've ever given? Who knows, right? You know, I've experienced everything in between it. And just because the person who's been doing it 30 years doesn't mean that they're any better than the person who's just their first one. Just saying that
very
too.
True. Yeah.
Right.
True.
I've captured some pretty high profile people, not the best speakers in the world.
I know, that's where they should come to me.
Yes, they should. Okay, I'll get you on speed dial. I'll send them all your way. Definitely. So it's a gamble, but I like not knowing what they're going to say, because I want to be as present in my listening as I can possibly be. And if I get too much information ahead of time, I'm thinking about what I think they're going to say instead of what they're actually saying. So even though there's an element of risk, and if they do a PowerPoint presentation correctly, it shouldn't tell me a whole lot anyways. So I just sort of like, I don't need slides. Don't tell me what they're going to say. All I know is the title and their name. That's all I know when they walk on stage. I try not to research people too much because it freaks me out. So, yeah, especially if they're like a little bit high profile. Like I recorded an Olympian yesterday, or not yesterday, last week at the event I just mentioned. I didn't know there was going to be an Olympian there. I was like, oh, look at that. But if I would have Googled her beforehand, I probably would have freaked myself out.
Yeah, right.
And put her up on a pedestal, and I would have been all like clammy. And they walked down. She's like, I want 2-time gold medal. I'm like, oh, well then, she wrote a book. Look how great she is. I'm like, oh, look at that. Look at that. I get to meet an Olympian today. That's pretty cool. So, you know, I like going in just, you know, that's just my process. I don't know if that's as common in others who maybe do this type of work, but that's the way that I've kind of trained myself to kind of do it. And it's like the listening and the thinking piece for like a convention presentation, but there's also like a whole other language in my mind of drawings. And I think sometimes people see what I do and there is an element of magic to it, but it's not like I've never drawn that image before. Like, you know, the chances of me drawing something for the very first time on a live drawing, very slim. Like sometimes I'll like take my phone out and like, how do I draw this thing? Like, so give me a doodle of this. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I could recreate it. But you know, the behind the scenes of it is just me honed my skills over time and how I listen, which is really hard to articulate, unfortunately. But then there's also this huge visual vocabulary in my mind that I can just pull from. And I've trained myself to draw and write extremely quickly. Like if there's ever a Guinness World Record for like fastest writing or drawing, I'd really like to apply for it, because I don't think I'd win, but I'd like to try.
So, you should have been in shorthand with me.
There you go.
That's makes you a fast writer too. All right, it is. Time has flown by.
I know, the problem. I tried not to be too long-winded. I told you this before we recorded.
Did great. You did great. So what would you contribute your success to? I mean, I don't think there's a lot of you out there.
honestly, I contribute my success to nothing that we've talked about so far, but honestly, it's all of the self-development and personal work that I've done on myself. As there's, there's so many things that can stop you from succeeding. The obvious one in the room is the starvest artist mentality, right? That's just one of so many, and growing up and believing that you can, like, I never thought I'd start a business. I never thought I'd be an artist. Like, none of these things were on the table for me. So I had to do a lot of like rewiring of my brain of what I believed I could achieve, what I like believed I could charge, like just like slowly over time. And luckily around the time that I started my business, I was sort of on this kind of personal self-development journey. And so it was really good timing, because then I ended up just focusing, like reading a lot of books around money and that were written by women. That was really helpful. And, so I if I wouldn't have done all that work on myself, I would not be here today, hands down, like 100%. Like, I think I did more work on myself than my actual like craft at like for those first few years. I'm like, forget drawing. I'll figure that out later. I got to work on my brain first.
Well, that is true in everyone that's, an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And it's a never ending process.
It is, absolutely. And every time you want to try to challenge yourself a little bit more, it's like I've hid behind my illustrations for so long. And now I'm like, I want to like talk about the book I wrote. I want to like be on podcast. But it's like I've had to do a lot of work on myself to get comfortable with like showing my face.
That's right.
And people think, when I've tried to explain this to people, they like don't get it. And I'm like, yeah, but I've always let my work speak. Right? It's so easy to hide behind it. It's like, no, but here's the drawing I did, but here's another drawing I did. Isn't it great? Obviously I want people to like my personality and work with me, but I'm not front and center. I've always let my work be front and center, because that's easy. Like, that's,
a lot of artists are that way.
Yeah. Right. So this year I've been really challenging myself on trying to be more visible, and that comes with a whole lot of insecurities to work through. So yeah, there's always something.
Well, I will tell you, you're just doing wonderfully. So no need to worry. And I'm sure everyone wants to know more about you. So I'm going to share my screen and give your contact information. So as always, if you are just listening, I'll give the website, and then you can go to my website or to the YouTube channel to see this screen as well. So the website is www.mindseyecreative.ca, mindseyecreative.ca. She's on Facebook at Mind's Eye Creative CF. In LinkedIn, it's Ashton Rodenhiser. And Instagram is Ashton Mind's Eye. And Twitter is Mind's Eye CCF it is.
I know. And they're all different.
And TikTok is at Mind's Eye Creative. And YouTube, just look up Ashton Rodenhiser or Mind's Eye. I'm going to let Ashton talk to you about her website and the things that you can find there.
Yeah, thank you. Do not take this as an example of all the socials, because they're all different. This is not advice here, definitely. But yeah, my website shows a few different things around. There's a few elements of examples, and then also a breakdown of what graphic facilitation is, what graphic recording is, and live illustration, as well as some books that I've written, including one that I just published a few months ago called The Beginner's Guide to Sketchnoting, which you can also find on Amazon and all those good places. But yeah, I also have some of my values around how I like to work. Accessibility is really important to me, and I try to also make my images as accessible as possible. So I have some examples on there about how I like to work, and include that into all of the pieces of work that I create for people as well. So yeah, lots of little gems in there to check out. I do have a newsletter that I send out every week with a sketchnoting tip on Sketchnote Saturdays, and you can sign up for that.
Awesome.
On there
that
as well.
Sounds great.
Yeah, lots of good things on there. Yeah.
Well, Ashton, it has been just wonderful. I'd love to have you back to talk more about your books that you have out there, and maybe have a little demo action going on.
Yeah, that'd
But
be a good time.
I
That'd be
think that would be
fun.
awesome. So, as always, I like to remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.